Alex Jones on the GCN Radio Network.
Webster Griffin Tarpley, we've got him for an hour because we have a surprise guest next hour. And boy, I do mean surprise. And that guest is only with us for 30 minutes. So in the last 30 minutes, I will do a focused report, I promise, on the government will hype swine flu outbreak to save Obamacare, warns Dick Armey. We have Congressman Brown saying they're going to use it to stage martial law. We have the Governors Association sending a letter to Congress and the Department of Defense saying you can't put regular Army to patrol America. 400,000, total end to posse comitatus, total military dictatorship. It is now actually happening here in the good old U.S. of A. So that is coming up, and how that ties into all these flu vaccine deaths, Guillain-Barré's disease, a bunch of others. It is all coming up today in the last 30 minutes after our surprise guest. But for the balance of this hour, Webster Griffin Tarpley's on. I was going to have him on for 2 hours today, but we had to switch our top guest. So Webster will probably be back the next week with Nothing But Solutions. But I want him to give us a taste of those at the end of this hour. But right now, talking to Webster Griffin Tarpley, I wanted to go into the second front opening up, not just conservatives and anti-big government people waking up in the town hall meetings, and his approval ratings dropping 3 points last week. Depending on which poll you look at, he has a 47 at the top to a 42 at the bottom, with Gallup and Rasmussen and all these other polls. We've got them linked up on Infowars.com and PrisonPlanet.com. But I wanted to feed into Tarpley's political brain data I've noticed as well and get his take on that after we talk about the second front and his idea of getting Cindy Sheehan while Obama's on vacation for a month. They're always planning something when that happens, to go out and confront him or go out and stand in front of the White House to try to reignite that attention and show people that she just wasn't this leftist figure and that she was discarded as soon as she actually really tried to end the war. But Webster, I understand you talk about what you've researched and what you know, but clearly you see them saying militias are about to attack, gun owners are about to attack, all gun owners are basically white supremacists that hate black people, and they're going to, the DHS reports demonizing gun owners, returning veterans. Now they're saying that, let me just finish this. Now they're saying that they're planning to stage terror attacks. They're hyping all this. And I see the Obama counter. I'm just going to tell you right now, not just being flu pandemic being their cover, unless we expose it, but staging Oklahoma-style attacks domestically to shore up support for a foreign operation, or maybe finally completing the Clinton-era stage terror of finally saying the homegrown terrorists are working with Al-Qaeda, a plan, a script they planned to go with in 95 but backed off of and just went with the homegrown. So I see this in the cards. I see this in the tea leaves as I stand over the cauldron here. I'm asking you, with that data, are you not seeing this chatter, or do you have a comment?
Well, I would certainly say that if you go back to the 1990s, the militias were heavily infiltrated and to some degree a project. Some of them were founded by the FBI and by the domestic counterintelligence and counterinsurgency apparatus. And if you look in my book, 9/11 Synthetic Terror, I've got a whole thing in there about, in particular, activities of British intelligence, because this was the playground in particular of British intelligence inside the U.S. And the advantage of using the British is that they're not susceptible to U.S. congressional investigations. In other words, you can do operations at arm's length. Often the British invite the U.S. to come into the United Kingdom and do things for them, and the U.S., the CIA, and so forth will invite the British to come over here
exactly.
and do things.
They also use Andreas Strassmeyer, whose father was a top SS general. It later turned out he was secret police anti-terror squad from Germany. They brought him to honcho the white supremacist and McVeigh and others out of Elohim City. That came out in FBI documents. So I knew you'd be up on this. I know Synthetic Terror covers it. It's now coming out that Hal Turner was an FBI informant. The FBI admits that in court. It's now turning out that almost all these major white supremacist groups are not infiltrated, but run by the feds, by the British, by the Germans, and by Israel. Israel is also, you'll have these white supremacist commanders with classic, Jewish archetypal Ashkenazi features. I've been to some of these events to protest them, and it's like, my God, there's the ADL on stage, like Adam Gadon, the Al-Qaeda leader, ADL grandson, this grandson of the ADL head, arrested for beating up Muslims, and then suddenly he joins and he's the guy fighting Al-Qaeda. So great points. Elaborate on that, because I see them rolling that out now.
Well, the Ku Klux Klan, just to focus on them, the Ku Klux Klan is, as far as I can see, a wholly owned subsidiary of the FBI and nothing but. So this is an apparatus of domestic provocateurs, and you're very right to say now the way that the ideological conflict is going, right? The ideological fronts are turning once again, and there obviously is a temptation to begin this demonization. And when you see that Southern Poverty Law Center getting into the act, that is a group of shills, basically. They are paid apologists. They are there to provide some kind of a halfway plausible academic sounding explanation for whatever the counterinsurgency line inside the United States may happen to be. So the fact that they point to this, we also have the Secretary of Homeland Security, Napolitano, otherwise known as Totalitariano, and her idea that, right, the veterans and the right-wingers and all this. So that's the atmospheric, and then you get a certain number of patsies, right? Look out for patsies, because that's always how it's done. And, the attempt to try to mesh, Al-Qaeda shows up somewhere in North Carolina or whatever this is, right? And they're all from the FBI. I think that indicates a possible direction. I don't think it's conclusive, but the more you talk about it, the better it is, right? The more this is ventilated and aired and people are inoculated, tell people that if this happens, this is 99.99% guaranteed to be a top-down false flag operation using patsies, using moles inside the government, and then using those technicians, right? If any big, heavy operations have to be done, they're going to have to use government resources, so that will require the presence of technicians and moles to bring that about. So it's a classical typology of what's going on. I don't think that's the only one, because there are competing priorities, right? There's a great desire to get something going vis-a-vis somebody, right? Be it Sudan or Pakistan,
let me stop
or
you there.
Russia or China.
I want to look at the geopolitical operations outside North America, and I agree. They're going to hit us all. They're going to have staged terror overseas, staged terror domestically. They're going to have other economic crises, hyped up environmental crises, biological, medical. I agree, Webster. That's why I wanted to get your take on this. But when I interrupted you earlier, the British really are the masters of divide and conquer great game. That was even Orwell's job as a member of the Imperial Police, as you know, when he grew up in India, before he had his first awakening to one level of the control paradigm. But expanding on that, Webster, it was the British, now declassified and admitted, as you know, but the listeners may not, that staged over 90% of the terror attacks in Northern Ireland and in England. And it turned out that you would have the top three guys in the military IRA were all British intel, and that they were actually killing lower members of IRA if they wouldn't go out and kill British policemen as a pretext to stay in Northern Ireland. So it's very, very elementary to keep occupation imperial forces in the country, to occupy the United States with federal troops. They're going to need to stage terror to have the pretext that there's some type of hidden phantom menace that they're fighting. And you're right. We have tracked British intel. I've actually had to deal years ago with attempted British intel insertion into our operation. And I want the British to know we were aware of that. I'm now revealing this for the first time. Go ahead.
Well, in my book, again, 9/11 Synthetic Terror, I tell the story of Agent Steak Knife. He was codenamed Steak Knife, and this was somebody that the MI5, MI6 had put into the top levels of the IRA, and his job was to kill people. And they also had agents in this other side, right? The Protestant counter gang to the IRA counter.
The Orange.
Right, the Orange. In this case, it's the the Protestant extremist group. So they were orchestrating a series of homicides, and this went right up to Thatcher. In other words, Thatcher was absolutely informed of everything. Wonderful Maggie Thatcher, the goddess of the neocons and so many others, and the goddess of the free marketeers too, because they think she was the embodiment of their policies. And I guess she was. She was actively running these kinds of operations.
I just wanted to point out to listeners, this is a fact that governments do this, and it's a historical fact. So we need people to realize this is an official Army field manuals that we showed people last week. We're just talking about something as a matter of fact as hammers and saws and lawnmowers being available at Home Depot. We're stating that ducks swim around in ponds or that fish swim around in lakes. I hope listeners understand what you're stating is a historical fact, Webster.